Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Do we really need cash anymore? Many countries are trying to ditch paper money for digital currency.
But what's the impact of a cashless society? We'll discuss that today on The Stream.
Hi, my name is Mandy Woodruff. I'm a personal finance writer from New York City, and I'm in The Stream.
In this digital age, is cash necessary? It depends on who you ask.
Sweden hopes to go completely cashless by 2030. But the trend to do away with paper money isn't exclusive to Sweden or Europe, for that matter. According to the credit card company MasterCard, Singapore, Canada, Australia, and the United States are among the top 10 countries using less cash. Proponents say going cashless would reduce transaction fees and help prevent money laundering and tax evasion.
But not everybody agrees. Here's Bjorn Eriksson from Cash Uprising. That's a pro-cash campaign in Sweden.
I'll give you three good arguments why we will never have a cashless society. Number one, this is not a political decision. It's a decision by 4 commercial banks that forms a monopoly. They earn more money on cards. Secondly, a cashless society means that a large group of people will be left aside. Elderly people, people living in rural area where you don't have a coverage, etc., etc. And that's 1 million Swedes out of 10. And thirdly, from a security point of view, if somebody want to do something negative against Sweden, for example, Russia, why should they invade us or a couple of our islands? Just put off the payment system and we will be completely helpless.
Cashless society, never going to happen. That's according to Bjorn. But joining us to discuss this, we have in Boston, Tavneet Suri. She's an economics professor at the business school MIT Sloan. In New York, David Levine. He's the founder of Odin River. That's a wealth investment firm. In Mumbai, India, Abhishant Pant. He is the founder of the Cashless Journey Project. And in Acapulco, Mexico, Jeff Berwick. He's the chief editor of the Dollar Vigilante website. Hello, everybody. All right, transparency here. Looking in your wallet or your purse, what is in it regarding money? Tavneet, what's in your purse?
So sadly, I have lots of money in my wallet today.
Coming over to your house.
I picked the wrong day.
Right.
I just got back from Kenya, which meant I was traveling with more cash than I usually have in my wallet. So I'm trying to be honest and tell you
that's
that's
honest. All right. Typical day, how much money would I find in your purse?
Probably $20 on a typical day.
All right.
Would be big.
David, what's in your wallet?
New York's expensive, and I think it's something like, $100 just to walk outside the door.
Ooh,
so do carry around cash.
Okay, you
got less and less
cash.
over time.
New York.
What's that?
I said, remind me never to move to New York.
Right.
So David's got 100. David's always going to be good for $100. Abhishant, what's in your wallet?
So I stopped carrying cash since 13th of March 2016. Since that day, I have not carried a single penny of cash, whether it is in India or it is in Bangladesh or it is in Singapore, Sweden, Berlin or in San Francisco. I have not carried a single penny of cash.
Note to selves, never ask Abhishant to lend you a $5. It's never going to happen. Jeff, what's in your wallet?
Well, I just came back from Las Vegas where I was playing the World Series of Poker, so I have a few $1,000s worth of Federal Reserve notes in my wallet, but that's actually not normal.
Just show off.
I normally don't care too much about Federal Reserve notes or any sort of fiat government currency. Of course, it's not backed by anything, and it's just pieces of paper with dead criminals printed on it. So the most important things in my wallet are things like my Bitcoin debit card from Wirex, and I also have a gold-backed debit card as well from Gold Money. So those are more important to me than the actual fiat currency, which I'm always trying to get rid of because I'd rather keep the gold and the Bitcoin.
Okay, so our community is also weighing in on this question. This is a tweet we got from the Netherlands, where Rude Wedding says, here, people rarely use cash. It's PIN code, paying daily in the supermarkets, and online shopping is booming. Another person writes in, with contactless pay and online transfers, there's no need for cash. In fact, I find having to carry it or withdraw it a pain. And one last comment that I will throw to here. This is a video comment we got from someone. This is Stuart Hutton. He's a chief investment officer out of the UK, and he has gone cashless for the past year. Have a look at what he told us.
Living in a well-developed country like the UK and travelling regularly to the Middle East and Far East, I've experimented this year with living without cash. It has been surprisingly easy in that almost all my regular vendors and establishments either accept card payment or even contactless, at which point I've used my finger on Apple Pay. For me personally, it's been a relatively easy journey with technology, supporting my cashless existence, mostly via the smartphone. However, I am concerned to the cultural impact this may have on some areas of our society. Even though it may be for the better, cash has been king for many generations, and it may take more than technology to drive through the real benefits to living in economic singularity.
So Tavneet, he is concerned about potential cultural impacts that could be good or bad. Do you have concerns? What would those impacts look like?
Yeah, let me not even talk about cultural impacts and just talk about economic impacts. I think, you know, if I decided to take cash out of my life today, I think it'd be really easy. I have several credit cards. I have a debit card. You know, the ATM is in my office building. But for a lot of people in the developing world, they live pretty far from the financial system in general. And so thinking about what their lives would be like without cash is a pretty dramatic change. So I think as we think about what cashless might mean, I think we have to realize that there are people who live up to 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers from any financial institution of any sort. And so providing kind of, or trying to move towards cashless will have sort of very big effects on people who aren't traditionally included in the standard financial systems that we might have. I know that, you know, someone mentioned Bitcoin and gold, but these are also not resources that large shares of the developing world have access to at all. And so if you have no other store of wealth, this is kind of it for you.
Sir, it's a great point, but I was just thinking about M-Pesa in Kenya, which I think in Kenya is something like 20.
David, given I've been studying it for the last decade.
Right, and so, but the reason why I bring it up is if we think about those who have the least, in a way, the legacy financial systems aren't really serving them very well today. And so M-Pesa, in a way, maybe that's a leading indicator for what a cashless society could provide, meaning, you know, having mobile payments, providing from the beginning of people kind of entering the financial system, the ability to have money in their hand. Maybe in a way, paper, you know, kind of failed in, you know, in that regard in some of the developing nations like Kenya.
Cash in and cash out of M-Pesa, right? I still need to go to a cash in, cash out point.
Yes, let me just interject slightly and just say that M-Pesa is a way of using mobile transfers to move money around. And as I showed in that little picture there, you don't even have to have a fancy smancy smartphone, just one of those tiny little mobile phones that we used to have back in the 80s.
I call it the Nokia brick.
Yeah.
I call it the Nokia brick. I just need the Nokia brick.
And you use your phone to transfer money around, and almost like a mobile bank. And a lot of people in Kenya are using it, even if they don't have a bank. It's usable.
Oh no, you don't need a bank account at all.
Yeah,
it's completely independent of a bank account. And actually, what they've added over it, which probably will add to the conversation, is you can now kind of do a bunch of retail payments. So if I have a retailer, imagine I went to a restaurant and I wanted to pay for my meal with M-Pesa, I could just kind of put in an account number for the restaurant and pay it. So that's slowly happening. But just remember, M-Pesa's been around for a decade, right? It's taken a decade to get most households an account. This is not an overnight process.
I think from an India perspective, we have moved away from or moved on from something which is primarily a mobile-led to something which is going to be a biometric-led, wherein you are talking about a nation which has got 1 billion individuals who have their biometric identities in place. You have got the account mapping in place for them, and you have got mobile phones with them. So I think for us, possibly the natural evolution might not look like the M-Pesa kind of a scenario, but more may look like a biometric-driven scenario wherein the usage or the money usage will not be restricted to a device, but will be something which you carry on your own at all times, which is yourself. And that biometric identity, I think, will be the most dumbest solution available, which anyone can use. And you don't have to spend in capacity building and other things, which, except for M-Pesa in Kenya and maybe to an extent Bcash in Bangladesh or Dialog or Gcash in Philippines, except for these 4 or 5 examples, the mobile money solutions have not actually been able to work beyond the cash in, cash out solutions. Partly, M-Pesa did a few things around Lipana M-Pesa and a few more aspects of it. But I think from an India perspective, we may leapfrog and we may have a biometric-led solution, which will be far more engaging than what mobile-led solutions are.
But Abhishek, there are people online who just that fact is scaring them beyond belief. This is Byron. He says going cashless would spell the end of fiscal privacy. Governments pushing for cashless systems never speak of private options, i.e. Bitcoin. Another person writes in that they're more than concerned about their privacy and how banks are handling my data. So go with cash. Jeff, do you want to weigh in here on these privacy concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. It's much more than privacy. It's actually...
Well, let me hear Jeff's point of view first, and then we can get you back in, Abhishek.
Yeah, it's actually much more than privacy. It's about actual freedom of people. So if the real question here is the money actually controlled by the government and the central banks, which are both incredibly evil and nefarious, or by the private market? And that first tweet mentioned it with Bitcoin. If it is a government or central bank currency, and we have things like biometrics that are chips in our hand, and this has been talked about in the Bible, by the way, being chipped in Revelation. If it's controlled, and they can actually just turn us off if they don't like what we're doing, and then we can't buy anything anymore. This is absolutely going to be absolutely heinous. However, if we move to a digital currency like Bitcoin, which isn't controlled by government and central banks, then no one can actually turn it off and no one can seize it. And actually, some of the comments about how...
But hold on a second. Just with Bitcoin, I'm a big believer in cryptocurrencies. So let's put that out there at first. But Bitcoin can't even agree about which fork they're going to use in August for segregated witness, and the reason is that it's a developer-led. There are good reasons, meaning it's an independent community. They're debating things, but it's a very nascent technology. When we talk about money, we're talking about people being able to buy food, being able to buy their groceries, and we're concerned about
Bitcoin's new.
But hold one more point though. We're concerned about security. As you know, the Bitcoin community today also has a lot of hackers, and even very sophisticated people. Some leading venture capitalists, you may have read about this, have been hacked lately. And so it's a very nascent, very early stage community. Ethereum, as you know, had a hard fork that was created by the founder himself for good reasons.
Let me just put on pause a moment. Yeah. Ethereum, as you know, well, Jeff might know, some of the viewers may not know. Obviously I do, but I'm asking for the other rest of the community. So explain. Before you proceed.
So the two major cryptocurrencies today, the most popular one is Bitcoin. That's the most popular, most widely held. The second most popular is called Ethereum. It's a couple years old. The price went from around, I'd say $1 to $300 just in the last 6 months. It's been a huge success. The market cap of Ethereum, which is a digital currency that allows people to build new applications using blockchain, which is kind of the backbone technology for cryptocurrencies. That Ethereum technology is the second most popular, but what I mentioned about the hard fork, it's kind of a technical term, which means changing the history or changing the blockchain or changing the ledger. That happened just in the last couple of years because there was a huge hack that happened in the community. All of these points are just to say that it's very early technology.
More about the security aspect and the privacy aspect and other things associated with the fact, and Ethereum blockchain and others might be relatively new, and if we need to look at it from the perspective of nations wherein, like my nation, wherein more than 500 million people earn a living which is less than $2 a day. For us, the concern is having an individual who is in a position to have a credit profile, which can only happen in an environment wherein you have credit records and digital footprints available. When you don't have that available, how people who earn $2 a day and who essentially earn in cash will be in a position to have that, will be in a position to have a credit profile which allows for access to credit at a cheaper rate and things of that nature. That will never happen. And for such people, the privacy and other aspects are a kind of look like an elitist thought, because somebody who doesn't have access to these basics, which you and I can enjoy at any point of time, for them our thoughts are quite elitist in that sense around privacy and other things.
I think even before we start to think about credit profiles, just getting people digital payment accounts has huge impacts on their lives. So the work we've been doing on M-Pesa over the last 8 or so years in Kenya has basically shown that M-Pesa led to a reduction in about 2 percentage points in extreme poverty. So the people living under $1 a day, 2% of them came out of that, not because of credit profiles, not because of credit access, but because they had access to this cheap payment system that allowed them to do transactions across space. We also see that women in particular are able to shift occupational choice. So about 2% of women, this matches to about 186,000 women across the country that move out of farming as their primary occupation into a business or a retail primary occupation. And so you're seeing, even before credit profiles, allowing people a payment system that doesn't require them to travel, that doesn't impose the transaction costs of the person needing to move across space, has value and has huge value in these economies.
So,
right?
Tavneet, you said, Tavneet, so I want to jump in here because you said something interesting. You said having access can change lives, and I hear you, and I think our community hears you. But then, does that make the problem exacerbated for those who don't have access? We have a tweet here from Fiji. This is Jacinta, who says, here in Fiji, it'll be a hard ask, as most of our people live in remote areas. Another person writes in from Zimbabwe. I spoke to family members who live in rural areas. Financial transactions for them are harder. Infrastructure is slower than the need is. And one more tweet I'll read here. This is from Jonathan, and he gives this scenario of difficulty. He says, official documents cannot block you from giving or receiving money. I cannot give a homeless person money easily through electronic means.
Right. So, one of the beauties of M-Pesa is I don't need all the formal documents as I do in a bank account. I'm just using my phone. So that's one. The second is, I agree completely with the transaction costs in rural areas are enormous. So before M-Pesa came into Kenya, the average Kenyan, not the worst off, the average Kenyan lived about 10 kilometers from a bank, from the closest bank branch. If you live and people don't have cars, right? So they're not driving. Imagine if you had to walk 10 kilometers to the bank to get cash. This is just a non-starter for people to use regularly. Right, if you look at mobile money now, the average mobile money agent is about half a kilometer from people.
Let me just show Jess something. Tavneet, I get what you're saying. M-Pesa must be very happy today. If I got a dollar for every time you mentioned M-Pesa, I could take you all out for a Starbucks coffee. All right, and I just did it myself. NDTV, this is India, Jeff. Let me show you this. Tax break on payments up to 2,000 if you use your card, not cash. You have described those kind of incentives and the idea of cash being put to one side. There are some places now that you can't even use cash anymore. You've described that as a war on cash. Why do you say that?
Yeah, this has been going on for decades.
This is Jeff. I'll come back to you, Abhishan. Just let me hear Jeff for a moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, this has been going on for decades. It's actually on the front cover of the Rothschild-owned Economist magazine in 1988, talking about a new world currency being rolled out in 2018, which is actually next year. So they've had this plan in process for a while. And as I pointed out earlier, the main goal of it all is to get every single person in the world, and that's the real goal, is a one world government, under and into the taxation system. And of course, taxation is theft. It's just extortion, and no one should be supporting it in any way. And they want to just tax every single transaction.
Right.
I want you
to finish, Jeff, but
and they want to get them all into the system, and that's essentially why they're trying to get rid of cash, because with cash you can't really tax every single transaction.
Do you pay tax, Jeff?
Absolutely not.
No tax whatsoever?
Well, I try not to. Of course, it's almost impossible. There's so many taxes in the world today. There's a hotel tax, a capital gains tax, a liquor tax, a food tax. But whenever I can, I avoid it at all costs.
So it's more,
I don't want to support
the system that you're upset with, not the actual way people pay. Abhishan, what were you going to say? Go ahead.
No, so what I wanted to say is that from my different experiments during my cashless journey experiment, I saw various mechanisms and various methods wherein people and their lives got benefited by moving to digital methods of payment. Around 3 months into my cashless journey experiment, I went and met with a few people in this remote town of India, and this gentleman whom you see in the picture, I met him in one of the remote village of Uttaranchal, which is one of the hilly regions of India. And therein, this gentleman, when I showed him how to transfer money using a mobile, he made a very, very interesting statement to me. He said that today you got my son closer to me, because earlier I used to travel around 30 kilometers from my place and used to get the money which my son used to send. Now, the challenge is that how much are we in a position to go to such places, provide for capacity building, do that support and provide for that support mechanism. Until and unless we do that, we are not in a position to bring real change in the lives of these people. And as Tavneet was earlier sharing, that frankly, the first step is to provide them with the bank accounts. And that's the step from which you start.
And one of the great trends, I just also want to kind of reply to what was said before. One of the great trends that's happening right now is there are, billions and billions of people with smartphones in their wallets today, and there are even more than that with mobile phones. And so, I do kind of, get the idea that in the long run, maybe we'll use biometrics. But today, we already have the ability to reach people with mobile devices. To the point about not paying taxes, I mean, we have a social safety net. We have to take care of the weakest. I think that it's easy for us to kind of, for us in our kind of comfortable existence to talk about destroying the government and having no tax and having no currencies.
The government doesn't take care of the weakest. The government destroys the weak. Welfare programs destroy people. Private charities do a much better job than having a system of extortion, which is all taxes is, and taking and wasting most of it with bureau rats.
So, gentlemen, this is a tangent, and this is a fascinating conversation for another fascinating show. Meanwhile, Malika.
Well, this is another little twist here that I'm going to throw to one of you. This is Elmas, and she says one of the examples of this cashless societies is EBC in Somalia. Convenience is the key, as you don't have to carry around cash. There are no transaction fees that are incurred, and almost all vendors utilize it. It sounds great. But someone wrote back to her tweet, Africa Classifieds, and they say they've seen that service that the telecommunications company provides, and the fact that the currency is run by a private entity is what I'm skeptical about. Tavneet, you're nodding your head there. Is this a concern?
No,
who benefits from this?
Spectacle versus skeptical. No, look, I think that I want to just pick up on something, David said earlier too. Much as people have phones, there are still a lot of people in the developing world who don't have phones. And as we move to cashless, we just want to make sure that the people who are still without phones are not completely excluded from this, right? And I think this sense of kind of vendors having the ability to do this versus not having the ability to do this will be even more and more as as the group that doesn't have phones gets smaller and smaller. So I think we just still have to kind of watch out.
I think it's really important to think about who loses today. So today, if you look at fees in the existing economy, so in the U.S., look at big banks, and the big banks charge fees to those who are poor. Those who are wealthy don't pay fees. And so the cash-driven economy today is actually harming those who have less money, and through ATM fees, and frankly through the stranglehold that they have over paper cash. And so, in a way, what we see in the emerging economies in Pesa we've mentioned, but there's others, where people are leapfrogging the old system, where people are using new technologies. In a way, it's a way to go to a digital, free, low-cost solution today that can avoid some of the fees that are harming the weakest, in our current economy and in our current banking system.
Yeah, but just it would be interesting to hear Pant's view on this because much as M-Pesa is great at the transaction fees for daily, I want to buy a bottle of Coke transactions are not trivial. Under $2 they're free, but if I want to buy something slightly more, the transaction fees are high. So the India system actually, I think, has the government building one back end of this system over mobile phones, not just the biometrics, but the transaction costs on that are, I think, absurdly low.
So Tavneet and David and actually Abhishan and Jeff, we're almost at the end of this part of the program. I'm going to actually take you all online. But I'm just very curious, as I asked you what was in your wallet, I'm going to ask you something very quickly in the last 1 minute of the show, and that is cash doomed, Tavneet? Are we done with cash?
I always get to go first.
Yes.
I don't...
It's a yes or no. David?
Doomed is a negative word.
Cash is going away just like dead paper newspapers are going away. Digital is the future.
Yeah, but I don't know whether doomed is like...
On the way out. Abhishan, stop debating me. I don't... Abhishan, what do you think?
Cash is on way out.
Jeff?
Yeah, on the way out,
From an India perspective, I think it's on way out.
On the way out.
sorry. So from an India perspective, what I see is that
Abhishant and Jeff and David and Tavneet, we've obviously got a lot more to talk about. I just try to get a sense of what you thought might happen to cash very soon. We will find out at stream.aljazeera.com online, where our conversation continues. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Hello, everybody. It was mean of me to just throw out, is cash doomed, and then expect you all to come up with us with a yes or no in less than a minute. Obviously, you couldn't be done.
I'm gonna be sad about it.
Yes.
That's why I was struggling.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether your grandchildren will have any, or the next generation will actually have any cash in their wallet. What do you think, Jeff? I mean,
yeah,
you
that's what I was going to say when you asked about cash being doomed. I was going to say I think our grandchildren will be shocked and surprised to hear that for money we used pieces of paper that had absolutely nothing backing them, issued by a communist-style central government with pictures of dead criminals printed on it, and people actually accepted it as money. I think they'll be shocked, and I'm glad it's going away.
So you're only talking about US currency here, because there are other currencies around the world who have very laudable people on their currency.
I haven't seen too many of them. If they're politicians, they're not laudable.
I have a great currency in my wallet. No criminals, heroes.
As far as
those guys,
as far as we in India are concerned, frankly speaking, from our perspective,
David, that was Andrew Jackson, and I think there are many Native American communities that would disagree with you. But I'm going to pivot just a little bit to this tweet. This is from the Blueprint, who's talking about the answer to a push to going cashless in their country and the problems or the good things about that. The Blueprint says corruption is one of the driving factors behind that. It helps stop the illicit movement of cash by politicians. Another person writes in saying, black marketers deal in cash, which is untraceable. Online transactions are traceable, plus cashless deals a blow to laundering. So it seems like some good things there. David, do you agree with those statements?
So I do think that there are certain points that Jeff's making that I think I agree with. One is that blockchain, allowing a private entity that is distributed in nature, that can be secure to trace transactions, can be a source of trust and trustless transactions, which can eliminate some of the consequences of, the old money economy. But again, I think these things are going to take a very long time. And in the immediate term, we need to be thoughtful about those who are weakest in our economy. And so I think the transition is going to start with our existing money, plugging it into our existing technologies like smartphones, and allowing people who have those technologies to have access to digital versions of our current money, while working towards blockchain-like solutions in the long run, which can reach hopefully the whole planet in a way that allows anyone to transact. One of the worst fees, if you think about Western Union, can you imagine how much people have to pay just to transfer their money back home if they're visiting a foreign country? It's exorbitant. And these things that exist in the current old money system are really bad. And so I understand some of the reasons why we want to move beyond it, but I do think we have to do that in a way that works for the weakest today. And those
and David, I would just add, we can't do it overnight. It's not going to happen in one day or a few days. This is a process. Even in Sweden, we've seen it as a process. So I think this is something that will progress at a pace of its own.
I get the feeling, Abhishant, that India is in a hurry and it wants it to kind of happen now. Do you get that same sense of urgency in India?
Yeah, I think at least from an India perspective, if you look at it, I think the most remarkable thing that happened from an India context happened just 2 days back. 2 days back, Reliance Group, which is one of the largest groups in India from a telecom and otherwise perspective, that group announced that they will be providing 4G mobile phone to people at zero cost. They are saying that they will provide a 4G mobile phone at a monthly rental of $2.50 with unlimited phone calls, unlimited voice calls, and it has a security deposit of just $23. Which is returnable in 3 years period. So what essentially means is this, that more than 65% of adults who are approximately 500 million people, they can essentially access a 4G device with just $2.50 a month cost. Think of the kind of impact it will have on each and every one, which essentially means that you are in a position to provide a smartphone in hand of anyone who is even the bottommost of the pyramid, and you are in a position to provide it to them. And then in a 3 to 4 years period, you are in a position to transform a nation completely, because everyone in that nation has a 4G mobile phone. I think from that perspective, the transition or leapfrog from an India perspective will be driven by multiple factors. One of them being this factor, which will be one of the critical factors.
That's why cashless is optimistic. You know, I mean, when I hear you speak about that, to me that makes me extremely optimistic that a cashless digital economy can provide the same kind of access that Twitter provides to the news today. The good parts of Twitter, not the bad parts. But, you know,
I would just caution against the bottom end of the income distribution again, because $23 is not a small amount of people for small amount of money, not small amount of people, small amount of money for some people. And then you have to also think about education and all this other stuff. So I don't think this is the entire solution.
We're communicating. What's so beautiful about this very conversation today is we're communicating with people.
I hear you all sort of singing harmony from the same choir. Let me just check in with Jeff. Jeff, is this conversation making you incredibly miserable?
No, it's not too bad, actually. I thought it was going to be far worse than it has been so far. It's been some good opinions on here.
Exceeded your expectations. That's good.
But I did notice the first two tweets that you mentioned there, and I had a few comments on that, and that is that the one person said, well, if we track all transactions, then we can get rid of some corruption out of politics. You'll never get rid of corruption out of politics. Politics is corrupt at its base level. Really what you need to do is just get rid of governments and central banks is the way to go. And then the second tweet was about how we need to track things in the black market. The black market is just another word for the free market, and the government just wants to get rid of anything that they can't tax or legislate or regulate. And so we should let the free market run and actually get rid of governments and central banks. So we'll actually have peace and prosperity like we've never known it. And a lot of these comments about how people don't have enough money to afford these things, that's mostly because of their own governments have ruined their countries and their central banks have hyperinflated their currencies. So that's why they're so impoverished.
Can I just?
Well, I just heard a really great story about it.
Provide some evidence on India.
Yes, Tavneet.
Just because of the corruption stuff. There's been a really nice study on the UID, the biometric ID in India, basically showing that when you put people on biometrics and you digitize some of their workfare programs and things, you actually see about a 35% reduction in corruption.
But we also,
so money that's paid to people
we
who
on the
don't
stream
exist.
also
So
have Tavneet, but the other side of that is that the government will then say that the biometric system is supposed to be optional, and then we've seen more and more of those benefit programs having to be mandatory, which means that there's some people who are in the informal communities who really need the help from the government, and they're not getting it because they're not signed up to the biometric system. So it's options.
Bottom end, and that's where I spend most of my time thinking.
Yeah.
But you know, India has.
There's always a but. There's always a but in every conversation.
There is.
Right.
There is always a but. I'm sorry.
Tavneet, David,
we just heard a very optimistic.
You are very optimistic. You are very optimistic.
Yeah, we just heard a very optimistic story about the economy working, you know, in India today. I mean, that should give us all hope.
All right. Really interesting hearing from all of your perspectives. Malika, where do you want to leave us?
Two sides of a coin. Attila says going cashless is like browsing without a VPN and trusting your internet service provider to not sell your history. Would you? Clearly, he would not. And Paul, on the other hand, says, I walk with safety knowing I can transact with a secured mind. It's convenient payment knowing that not at all times can I access an ATM.
Malika, how much money do you have in your wallet?
I keep $20 always.
Okay, I think I've got like 10 cents. Drinks are on me, everybody. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure talking to you. See you online. #AJStream. And for our guests, we were preempted, so your friends who you told you were going to be live on Al Jazeera, hopefully they went online and saw you there. If not, you will see us in the replays, and we will tell you how to see yourself a little bit later, because you did a great job. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care.